Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever it is for you. For me, it is just past midnight on Tuesday, the 11th of November, day 1356 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. How do you do? I'm Peter Alexievich, and this is the Live at 5 from Kyiv, coming to you live from this major European capital, currently under siege. How's everybody doing tonight? I see Pugga Mahone is here. Hey ho from Germany. Dude, is this shirt too light? Is this one better? Neither one are great, are they? Van. Hey, Richard Prexis. How you living, Van? Hey, Bernie. Hey, Roy Daniels. Hey, Akron. Neither is great, are they? Neither one is great. Yeah. The green is better, you think? A free ferb? Hey, everybody. Oh, no, that was Jan K. That was Jan K. Jan Halverson is our sponsor tonight. So big thanks to Jan, if we see Jan around. Hey, Arna. How you doing? Arna and I were talking about our frustration with the Trump administration earlier today. Boy, it really is tough watching this bastard destroy my country. Hey, Guard. Hey, Eli. Hey, Clive. Anthony. Anthony was on my live this morning. Hey, Mike now. Hey, Marius. I hope we have a quiet night, too. Hey, Gary. Hey, William. Well, thanks, William. Maybe it's time to see an optometrist, huh, pal? Hey, Chef Deb. Mike Kelly. Hey, Dan. Oh, Dan, you're in Australia. I didn't realize that. I don't know if Alice is here, but old Dan there is giving her a run for the money in going through the old Patreon videos. I really appreciate it, Dan. I hope you're finding them interesting. I do not still live in the USA. I'm not entirely sure. Hey, Jason. I'm not entirely sure when I'm going to go back. Hey, Missile. So I live and have lived for almost 3 years now in Kyiv, Ukraine. Because this is the most important thing happening in the world right now. There's just no two ways about it. There's Jan Halverson. And Jan is our sponsor tonight. Everybody thank Jan, please. Guys, the sponsorships really make such a difference in my life, I can't tell you. It really makes a big difference. As do all of you and all the Patreon folks, without whom none of this happens. I did a live today, just walking to the grocery store, and we had some good conversation. Kind of a prelude to tonight, because I was going over a number of the facts and figures that I want to present to you this evening. In support of my theory, not even a theory, hypothesis, not even a hypothesis, because I haven't done any research. I've just done some reading. But I have this notion in my head, and I'm probably wrong. I mean, nobody should listen to me. I'm wrong about everything all the time. Just ask my ex-wife. But I'll tell you, things are bad for Russia, man. Let's start with the Russian strikes against Ukraine first, and then we'll talk about just how bad things are for Russia. So here in Ukraine, over the weekend, we saw one of the largest missile and drone strikes against the country. 4 months ago, it would have blown everything away. It would have been the biggest missile and drone strike of the war. Now it just barely squeaked into the top 10. It was a big one. 458 drones, 45 missiles. Now, even though almost 90% of the missiles were intercepted, they did a lot of damage over the weekend, boy. Chenengo which is one of the local energy companies. They operate 3 thermal power plants. All 3 of their thermal power plants were offline. All of those cities without heat, without light. Poltava, there are areas in Poltava that are still recovering heat, water, and electricity after this massive missile and drone strike over the weekend. The really disturbing part of the weekend strikes by the Russian Federation was the Ukrainian interception rate on missiles. Only 9 missiles out of 45 were dispatched. That is a 20% interception rate. You know they did damage. Damage was done over the weekend. One of the most difficult nights of the war, said a spokesman for President Zelensky's office. This was overnight, Friday into Saturday morning. Now, I want to highlight, as bad as the overnight attacks were, Saturday night, we had power, we had light, we had heat, we had water, and Laughter is the Best Medicine's November show at Gonzo Bar Lukianivska went off without a hitch. In fact, it was the best attended show by Laughter is the Best Medicine in our history. Over 40 people were there. It was standing room only. Every seat was taken. People had a great time. We all laughed in the face of this Russian evil. We really did. I'll tell you, it was deeply satisfying for me to be part of that experience. And I'm very grateful for everybody that came out and everybody that tuned in to the live stream. Look for us next time, December 6th. Now, last night, overnight, we saw 67 drones come in, 80% interception rate almost. But of the 7 missiles, 0 were intercepted. 0 were intercepted. So again, what we're seeing, now look, there's a big difference between what happened on Friday and what happened last night. I'll tell you why. On Friday, the missiles that came in were hypersonic and ballistic. Tough to shoot down, especially when you're running out of air defense. And one of the reasons that the Ukrainians are running out of air defense is, as I suspected, the American governmental shutdown. Now, I didn't have any evidence of this, but I have thrown it out there that the government shutdown, do you remember I said, Trump was talking shit about the Tomahawks. And I said, right now, the American government is shut down. Trump can say anything he wants. Nothing will get done because the government shut down. Well, now, yesterday, we have a report in Axios. Senior State Department officials confirmed to Axios that American weapons deliveries to NATO, our allies, and Ukraine, to the tune of $5 billion, have been stalled. The people who approve them, the people who manage these transfers, are all furloughed. Nothing's being done. Poland, some of the Baltic states, some of the Nordic states who have purchased weapons from the United States can't fucking get them. And that's true for Ukraine as well. Ukraine is quickly becoming a casualty of the government shutdown in the United States. And I know, Eli, as frustrating as that is, as angry as that makes us, to see the Democrats cave and make it all pointless has been the worst 12 hours of my life watching this bullshit play out. It's unbelievable. Oh yeah, it's all for his buddy Putin, make no mistake. As frustrating and as insane as everything happening is, as soon as you accept the reality that Donald Trump is a Russian asset in the White House to do the Kremlin's will. It all makes sense. Everything suddenly makes sense. Arn, stop that now. Come on. I mean, it's a problem right now. But look, we're in an active coup. The federal system of government in the United States has been subverted in an active coup by a malign foreign agent in the person of Donald Trump. This is not a normal situation. Not a normal situation at all. Okay, now, I put out a video today, and the trolls are all over it. Because in this video, I said Russia will be bankrupt in less than 60 days. And I absolutely agree with you. I absolutely believe that. Why do I believe this? Dan, that's simply not true. Dan Naga here is saying, nonsense. We simply don't have the supply in America to give it to anyone else. This is nonsense of the first order. Eldridge Colby himself, the Deputy Defense Secretary, announced that we have plenty of Tomahawks and we can give them away. And as far as everything else goes, we have more of everything than anyone else. So please, you can take that shit and shove it up your ass, you dummy. I mean, really, we're the American military, for Christ's sake. We have it all. Hey, Ed. And we have enough of it to fight two enemies at once. We have enough of it to fight China and Russia at the same time. So please. Hey, Scotty. So many of you here have heard me suggest that Russia is not going to survive the December budget reconciliation. And I have some data here today that supports that. Now look, Russia can still take extraordinary measures to save itself. There is a plan being floated right now to seize the bank accounts of regular Russians and give them coupons that they can redeem later for cash, right? This is the kind of extreme measure that I believe Russia will have to undertake, or somebody like China or Donald Trump is going to have to bail Russia out to avoid the consequences of what is coming. So, from the Russian papers today, Colin, desperate? Wait till you hear this, pal. So Nezavistam Gazetia is a Russian state-owned newspaper. And today, an economist writing in that paper said, quote, there is not a single factor that could improve the negative forces acting on our economy next year. There's nothing we can do. That's what this economist, writing in a state propaganda newspaper, wrote today. Now, if they're saying that in the papers, then surely the reality must be even far worse. Now, this economist went on to quote some of his colleagues. One of the realities of the 2026 budget in Russia is that the value-added tax has been increased from 20 to 22%. Well, these economists suggest that that's going to backfire, that it's actually going to result in less revenue coming in because people will not make the purchases. They're not going to be in a position to. And so consumer spending will contract even further. And despite a 2% tax increase, the Russian government is likely to see a drop in revenues of somewhere between 3 and 5%, according to these Russian economists writing in a Russian propaganda newspaper. Now, if they're projecting 3 to 5%, what's the drop-off really going to be? That is not all. Wait till you hear some of this shit. The Russians now are living in a world, get this, where an employee at a defense plant contacted the Atesh partisan group and gave them the details of that defense plant so that they could blow it up because he hasn't been paid in 2 months. Now, the defense industry is supposed to be recession-proof. In a war economy, the defense guys are supposed to be getting paid. Why is this defense employee not being paid for 2 months? Why did 150 Russian physicists, nuclear scientists, why did they go on strike? Because they haven't been paid in 2 months. Every time you turn around, Putin or Medvedev is threatening the West with some new nuclear holocaust, right? And they're not paying the nuclear scientists? I mean, are you fucking kidding me? And if this is the stuff we know about because the people are finally standing up, because they cannot live without a paycheck, how much worse must it be? Let's take a look at some of the details. Now, the first thing that I have to do is I have to apologize to everybody because in my report today, I mentioned that Russian railways lost 4.2 billion after having posted last year a profit of 44.7 billion. And I gave those numbers in dollars in the video. I apologize. They should have been in rubles. So the real figures in US dollars, they had a loss in the first 3 quarters of the year of about 54 million. So they're in the red, 54 million US. While last year they posted a profit over the same period of $541 million. So last year they made almost over half a billion. This year they've lost 50 million over the same period. And it is important to recognize that this is Russia's largest employer, that they have been forcing everybody to take 3 unpaid days of leave every month since August, trying desperately to keep payrolls at a minimum without having to let anybody go. Oil and gas revenues published today, down 21.4% over last year. 1 in every $5 that the Russians expected to bring in, they're not bringing in. And it gets worse because the Russian budget is based on a $70 per barrel price. The Russians aren't getting $70. They're getting about $54 a barrel right now for Urals crude. That's a $16 gap in millions of barrels a day. It's a bad scene for them. And it's only getting worse. Russian refined fuel products aren't even being exported. There is an export ban on a country that's nothing but a gasoline station with nukes. Doesn't even have the gas to export. Those numbers are now 0. Steel, the sales of steel down 14%. Crude oil exports down 20%. Rawstat says that of 44,000 companies reporting data, 1 in 3 are losing money. No, Anthony, they haven't repaired all the oil refineries yet. Oil refining capacity in Russia was thought to be down at its maximum 38%. But lots of repairs have been done. And so we believe that right now it's somewhere in the range of 17 to 23%. Corporate loans in arrears are up 64% since January 2024. Construction is down 6.7%. Overdue mortgage is 177 billion rubles. That's up 118%. Oh, mortgages overdue 90 days. That's what that says, 90 days. So mortgages past due 3 months, that's foreclosure window, are up 118% over last year. And that's what we know about. That's what we know about. Guys, everybody who follows this channel knows about December in Russia. That the Russians have a habit. It is an accounting fact in Russia that you always hide all your losses until December. Then you disclose them all at once. If Russian Railways says they lost $54 million in the first 3 quarters, it's likely that the real losses will be much larger. We know that overall freight in carrying in Russia is down 4.7% this year and is projected to go to 6.9% next year. Bad news for Russian railways. Russian auto manufacturing. Production is down 50% year over year. So if last year they were making 100,000 cars a month, this year they're making 50,000. And the entire industry has gone to a 4-day work week. Not because they are progressive, because there isn't enough work to keep everybody busy. Avtovaz has cut salaries by over 50%. The average worker at Avtovaz was earning $1,300 a month. Today it's $600 a month. And they saw mass resignations when they cut the salaries. The Russian bond market is a debt crisis of worthless paper. In one day, this last week, the bond market sold 206 billion rubles worth of worthless Russian bonds. The volume of bonds in circulation is up 4.4 trillion rubles. For what? What are they investing the money in? Capital destruction, bombs and drones and ammunition. That's where it's all going. Now, who's buying these worthless pieces of paper? The Russian banks, basically at the point of a gun. And that paper is worthless as we watch the sovereign wealth fund evaporate. The sovereign wealth fund had about 170 billion in cash in it when the war started. It's down to about 34 billion at the current exchange rate. So that assumes that the value of the ruble holds. It's not going to hold much longer. This debt crisis, this bad paper crisis, is going to come to a head, very likely in January. Now, what about the gold? Somebody said on today's walkabout, Russia's got all that gold. Bullshit, they have all that gold. The Russians, the sovereign wealth fund always maintained about 500 tons of gold in itself. Before the war, the Russians built that up to 700 tons, right? They wanted a little buffer. So a 200-ton buffer. What's in there today? 173 tons. They don't even have the 200-ton buffer left. And they're quickly running out of this as they spend it. Now, in the retail sector, it's a bloodbath inside of Russia, particularly for the hypermarket chains. Hypermarkets are like Targets in the U.S. Mayak in Moscow and Globus Gourmet in Moscow have both shuttered their doors. They're out of business. The same is true of Oki in St. Petersburg, also out of business. And guys, this is all before we watch $100 billion in Russian assets evaporate. All of the foreign assets of Lukoil are being divvied up by the governments whose countries they are in. The Russians, Gazprom, Rosneft, Lukoil, spent decades building overseas infrastructure, foreign refineries, foreign pipelines, developing foreign oil fields, building gas stations in foreign places, all to have leverage in those places, all to have political capital to spend in those places, economic leverage over those governments. And now we are watching it all disappear in 30 days. Well, now we're down to what? 11 days. They have 11 days to sell it. And no one will buy it because it's a toxic property and everybody is worried about secondary sanctions. So what choice does Bulgaria have? They have to seize the refinery that's in Bulgaria. They have no choice. That refinery produces somewhere between 70 and 80% of all the fuel Bulgaria uses. They have to have that refinery. The same is true of the Kazakh refinery. Now, the Romanian refinery, the Romanians are asking for more time. That refinery is less critical because it's not on, right? It's not working right now and hasn't been for a while. The Dutch are looking at nationalizing the Lukoil refinery in the Netherlands. Rosneft in Germany, they're looking to nationalize the whole thing. It's a couple of refineries and a bunch of pipeline infrastructure that has been administered by the German government since the start of the war, and all of their assets put in escrow. But gosh, Germany spent an awful lot on this war because of Russia. Why shouldn't they take them now? We're going to see Rosneft nationalized in Germany. We're going to see the Bulgarians take that refinery. We're going to see the Iraqis take the Western oil fields that Lukoil once had. All over the world, forces are gathering to carve up what were the Russian Federation assets and keep them for themselves. And it is all created, self-created by Russia. Make no mistake, they are to blame for their own misery. Even though they're all bitching and whining about this, they ignore the fact that they've nationalized $30 billion in foreign assets inside of Russia in the last 3 years. 13 billion of it just this year alone. Now, sorry, it's getting a little warm in here. Elvira Nabalina, who is an intelligent, professional, thoughtful woman, but she is, of course, a tool of the Kremlin. She's in charge of the Russian Central Bank. And she is the genius, frankly, who has kept the Russian Federation from going bankrupt these last 3.5 years. Well, it looks like she is signaling that she has failed, because she is saying that she won't let the 1990s return, even as we see it returning. This is now the third or fourth time she's talked about the 1990s returning. It is almost as if she is preparing the psyche of the people of the Russian Federation for the very worst, for a repeat of the very worst times in their living memory. And it certainly seems that we are watching it unfold. It's not merely the economics of this failed state, but it's the social discohesion of the highest death rates in Russia since the 1990s, combined with the lowest birth rates since the 1990s. Despite the fact that the Russians have put in place several programs to help encourage women to have more babies, the birth rate in Russia is down in 2025, 3.4%. In a country that is losing one person every 47 seconds, that rate of acceleration, that rate is accelerating as the birth rate continues to drop. Make Russia small again. They're doing it to themselves. We're watching as all their foreign influence fades. They've lost Syria. They've lost Armenia. They've lost Azerbaijan. Kazakhstan is always flexing its muscles these days. We see their fingers in Europe, their fingers in the pie, being withdrawn under the onus of American sanctions and the threat of secondary sanctions. You're right, Paul. HIV rates, drug use, and alcoholism are all very high in this failed state. Why wouldn't they be? Those things are high everywhere that people have no hope. And no one in Russia has hope. No one is hopeful for the future in Russia. A recent survey showed 70% of Russians see nothing getting any better in the next year. Now, we talked about that already. Okay. Now, over the weekend and overnight hits of the Ukrainians on the Russian Federation include, now, first there is the winter campaign. Oh, that's a good point, Trav. Hacky Sack Trav makes the point that don't forget when the SMO started, 1.4 million, it's an estimated 1.4 million, mostly young, professional, urban men, the backbone of your earners, of your economy, fled the country at the start of the SMO because they wanted to stay alive. Tomorrow night, we'll talk about measures that the Europeans are taking to limit Russian travel and Russian visas into their countries, and how smart I think that is. Nobody should be letting these bastards in. Not just because you don't know if they're going to try to burn down your IKEA, which they have done, but because they bring their ideas with them. And even though they are fleeing and they will not live in Russia themselves, it does not mean that they give up their Russianness, or that they think the genocide of Ukrainians isn't a perfectly fine way to spend a Sunday afternoon. So no, nobody should be letting these bastards in to civilized nations. Now, we saw Friday night, overnight, one of the most devastating attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure of the war. The Ukrainians are not sitting still for it anymore. They are not playing by the international rules. They are not being the bigger people. Fuck that noise. They are hitting energy infrastructure and plunging the Russians into darkness and cold, just as the Russians have done for 4 fucking years here. It's gonna be a tough winter on both sides, because the Russians aren't going to stop and the Ukrainians are going to give it back as good as they're getting it. So over the weekend, we saw the Voronezh thermal power plant hit, and we saw blackouts roll across the city and no heat. In Taganrog, The energy was shut down when a 110 kilovolt substation, which is still burning, I'm told, was hit. Fire at the Taganrog auto plant, which has been converted to other military industrial needs. In Belgorod, 20,000 people were blacked out with no heat. Again, when the Lush gas turbine plant was hit. In Kursk, in Koronivo, the 125 kilowatt substation was hit, and electricity was cut to Rilsk, the headquarters of the Southern Military Command in Russia. 220 kilovolt substation in Orenburg was hit. We don't know if that was drones or sabotage. That's pretty far out there. That's like, I want to say 1,200 kilometers, something like that. I agree, Bernard. It is time. Yep, you're right about that, Polka Paul. But that's a little ways away yet. That's a little ways away yet. We saw the Tuapse Marine oil terminal hit. Now dig it. There was videos of a huge blast and a building destroyed at the Tuapse Marine oil terminal. Everybody here knows, right? That's just across the Black Sea from Crimea. It's responsible for 20% of Russia's export of crude oil. We believe that a number of the berths were made non-operational last week after Marine drones hit the terminal. And all of the initial reports about last night's hit were about Marine drones. There's only one thing. The blast was too big to be a Marine drone. It was a building on land that was destroyed. That's not a Marine drone. And there is a massive crater in the beach at Tuapse. So apparently whatever it was came down and hit the beach and made a massive crater and had an explosion big enough to knock over a building about 50 meters away. Well, what's the only weapon that Ukraine has that does all of that? Flamingos. Now, look, we don't know that it was flamingos, but there is good evidence to suggest it was a flamingo or something like it. In fact, one might even say it's likely a flamingo because it missed the target. It was close, not 14 meters close like Firepoint wants us to believe the circle of error probability is. But it looks like if it was a flamingo, if you guys remember when the flamingos hit that GUR station in Crimea, one hit the target, one hit within 10 meters of the target, one was 100 meters away. It looks to me like flamingo might have a targeting issue. It doesn't meet the manufacturer's description of 14 meters. But that's okay, right? They'll work that out. I feel I have a high degree of confidence. It is possible that there was a second missile, and it may have hit a tanker at Pier 167. This is according to Ombre Global Intelligence, Ombre Global Intelligence, the maritime risk management company. Additionally, regional airports were closed down all the way from the Baltic border to the Ukrainian border to the Kazakh border. Nobody was flying in Russia over the weekend. Repeatedly, these airports were shut down. In Crimea, in Simferopol, an ammo dump has sustained burn-off of stored munitions for multiple hours. Somebody asked about Pokrovsk. Now, Look, we don't know what's really happening in Pokrovsk. I can tell you the best I know. But it is a dynamic, fluid, dangerous, deadly situation that is constantly changing. So this is what I believe is happening, as best as I can tell. We have a report that the Ukrainian armed forces have opened the supply road to Mirnograd, that rotations of troops are happening, fresh troops are going in, wounded and exhausted troops are being pulled out. The supply roads are open and secured. This is according to the Ukrainian military. Ukraine says the pace of Russian attacks have slowed as Russia attempts to consolidate gains and fortify defensive positions and await the arrival of more reinforcements. So it looks like the Russians are slowing the pace of the attacks because they are waiting for more guys to come in. This would certainly make sense, as we had reports that the 155th Russian Naval Infantry had been reduced to combat ineffective status and rotated out and needed to be replaced. The consolidation of the territory would make sense. They'll be conducting cleaning operations in southern Pokrovsk in order to make sure that there are no Ukrainians trapped behind their lines. They'll be building defensive fortifications along the area of control in order to maintain them. That fight is not done. And we don't even know what the Ukrainians really are up to. They do seem to be launching about 15 counterattacks a day. They have cleared the road to Mirnograd, but the Russians have moved almost to the very eastern edge of the town now. So the Russians continue to move forward there. We'll have to wait and see. At this time, we can safely say that it appears that there are no Ukrainian forces encircled there. That's important. It's also important to remember that the Russians are always celebrating their victories before they have a victory. It's just 6 days ago that Putin invited the press, saying that he would call a ceasefire and let the press go in and interview these poor, deluded, surrounded Ukrainian troops. It never happened, of course, because there were no surrounded Ukrainian troops. It wasn't real. Not to say that he didn't believe it. He may very well have believed it. It just wasn't true. And he said it not just about Pokrovsk, he said it about Kupiansk as well, which, by the way, is really, they're grinding the Russians up in Kupiansk. It's difficult. I'm not suggesting it's an easy haul for anybody. But the Russians are not surrounding the Ukrainians in Kupiansk. The Russians are being ground up into sunflower fertilizer in Kupiansk. Flamingos do go farther than the tomahawk. Farther, Anthony. 5 days left for Putin's November deadline. They got to take Pokrovsk by the 15th, right? Or the 16th, something like that. Where's Mel? Is Mel here? Mel is going to love this. We got the first video of the Raven doing its job. So, UK military engineers basically built from scratch a low-cost air defense system specifically designed for the needs of the Ukrainians, to take out drones and cruise missiles, basically. And they designed it and built it on the cheap, and they sent a bunch of them to Ukraine, and the Ukrainians love them. And we got video today for the very first time of the Ukrainian Raven shooting down KH-101s and KH-59 cruise missiles with startling accuracy and effectiveness, as well as a report from the Ukrainian armed forces that basically champions the Raven as a solution that is cost effective and deadly on the battlefield, or very effective at taking down enemy air targets. So it's excellent news. Is Mel not here tonight? That's too bad. He's always asking about the Raven, and now I finally have something to say about it. All right. The Inquisition UAV battalion destroyed a BM-21 Grad multiple launch rocket system somewhere in the east over the weekend. Okay, now look, this is crazy here. This is just crazy. Last week, we saw the Russians intentionally. I mean, they say they didn't do it intentionally, but give me a fucking break. This doesn't happen unintentionally. That you hit the main transmission power lines from the Ukrainian traditional power grid to the nuclear reactor at Kamensky and take the backup power lines out of service. The same day that you do it to the nuclear facility in Rivne and the southern all three of Ukraine's working nuclear power plants had their main transmission line struck in that big overnight attack last week. How can that be an accident? That's not an accident. That's nuclear blackmail. At the same time, remember last week, we were talking to our buddy Flip, who works at the Brussels airport, about how drones closed the airport there. Over the weekend, we saw drones flying what appears to be a reconnaissance over the Antwerp nuclear facility in Belgium. Now, all weekend long, I'm just shaking my head. Why Belgium? Why is Belgium getting so much attention? I mean, yeah, we've seen drone incursions pretty much everywhere in NATO territory now. And Belgium is the home of NATO, right, and the EU. But why, is that enough to give it all this attention? Why are they so provocative with Belgium? And then it was Dominic Nichols on the podcast Ukraine the Latest Today who cleared it all up for me. Where are $184 billion in frozen Russian assets being held? They're held at Euroclear, which is in Brussels. And so he seems to think that this is, and I think he's right. As soon as he said it, I'm like, of course, it's nuclear blackmail against the Belgians, not to give that money up. Yeah, why they're not taken out. I mean, more and more countries are giving fire authorization to their militaries to take them out. The problem is they're appearing in civilian areas. You can't just unload on these drones in the air. You don't have the weapons to do it, first of all. You try to use small arms, you have to be very close, and those bullets are going to come down in a populated area. The last thing you want is for the cover of the newspaper tomorrow to be, the school photo of a 7-year-old child who happened to get caught in the crossfire. It's dangerous to do. So I agree with Dom Nichols. I think he hit it on the head. It's the $200 billion that the Belgians have. So far, none of them have been armed. No. Holy shit! I nearly had a heart attack today. Austria said something meaningful. Can you believe it? Be still my heart. So Austria, who has claimed a lot of neutrality and has really stayed out of the Ukraine conflict, they certainly haven't done anything for the Ukrainians. They have pivoted. The foreign minister was very clear today when she said that Ukraine's peace must be fair and come with meaningful security guarantees for Ukraine, anchoring any peace deal to security guarantees for Ukraine. Now that is a change. That is a change. And it's a good change. It's a change in the right direction. Curiously, now this is very curious to me. So you guys know the Russian artillery standards are 122 millimeter and 152 millimeter shells, right? The 122 millimeters are lighter, cheaper, easier to produce, but they're not as effective. They don't pack the punch of the 152 millimeter shell. For whatever reason, Russia is producing new D-30 122 millimeter towed howitzer barrels rather than 152 millimeter barrels. And again, why? They're smaller, they're cheaper, they're easier to make. But if they're making them, that means they're out of D-30s. There are no more D-30s to pull out of storage. If they're having to make new, Steve, is that a correction? Are you saying 155 millimeter to me? Are you correcting me? 155 millimeter is NATO standard. Soviet standard is 152. So thanks for incorrecting me. So if they're making new barrels for D-30s, the only explanation can be that they don't have any left in storage. And that's quite a thing. Now, over the weekend, okay, real quick because we're running out of time, we got some very interesting video. There was great video of a Ukrainian owl taking out a Russian drone. Like even, and you can search for it online or check, I forget who published it. I don't remember who published it, I'm sorry. But it's great video. This Ukrainian owl just comes up, eyes flashing, right, grabs the drone right out of the sky, throws it to the ground. It's great video. Video has almost also emerged of a war sheep. These Russian guys are pulling a sheep to the front line with them that they have loaded with ammunition. Now, that's a good point, Steve. The owl is the symbol of the Ukrainian HOR, the Military Intelligence Directorate. In fact, Budanov has a painting behind him in his office of an owl hunting at night with a bat in its talons. The bat, of course, is the symbol of the FSB, Russian intelligence. Anyway, so the war sheep. This guy is dragging a war sheep to the front line that he has wrapped in a flak jacket and a bunch of ammunition. Right? Like if the ammunition gets hit, it's going to go off. I don't think the flak jacket's going to make much difference. So clearly, the guy is bringing the sheep along for three reasons. It's being used as a pack animal to carry his ammunition. When he gets to the front, he'll be able to use it for meat, right? That's a good idea, bringing your own meals with you. And then I will leave the third use of that sheep to your perverse imaginations. It is the Russians, after all, we're talking about. Okay, now, ladies and gentlemen, that's my top line stuff. We'll go to Q&A. A big thanks to Jan Halverson, who is the sponsor of tonight's live. Thank you, Jan. Big thanks to Lars, who has the Discord server, Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps group. And, of course, the moderator team, best moderators on the Tickety Talk. Thank you to Maddie, Feisty, Travis, Pete and Jay. Thanks, guys. Oh, no. We're not having that conversation here. Russian Welsh? I don't know what that means. Comfort sheep. That's good. That's good, Diehard. That's funny. I mean, I really did feel bad for the sheep. So questions, comments, points. Wow, 176,000 likes tonight. You guys must all have sore thumbs. Nice bip. Hey, MJs, I'm doing okay. How you doing? Oh, the Welsh do the sheep, I see. Dino, nobody knows what's happening with Lavrov. Anybody who claims they know is full of shit. He was not at over several days. He was not in attendance at several meetings that you would expect him to be at. However, that does not mean he's in trouble. It could be that he was on a mission for Putin. It could be he was busy doing something Putin needed. It could also be that he had been excluded. We just don't know. I wouldn't claim to know. He was back. He gave a briefing today as if everything were normal. Thanks, Beowulf. He gave a briefing today as if everything is normal. So I don't know what the situation with Lavrov is, and I would hesitate to speculate because I have no good evidence for any speculation. Arthritis is a side effect of watching the live. Kiwis normally get all the sheep jokes. Just as long as you don't get all the sheep, mate. Now Seawolf is saying he heard that he slipped away to North Korea for a couple days. See, Seawolf, that's entirely possible, right? That's all it was. That he needed to go talk to somebody, North Korean or otherwise. And he was off talking to them on behalf of Putin. That's, given Lavrov's deep integration with the Kremlin, that would be unsurprising to me. He's your favorite to hate, huh? MJs, I'm not sure that helicopter came down in Crimea, but I didn't mention it. I didn't do any report on it because it was a tragic private industry accident. It wasn't a military helicopter. They were defense contractors, but it was not a military helicopter. It was what was it? A KA-266 or something like that. That was owned by Electrical Manufacturing, something like that. And I think a crew of 7 plus the passengers were all lost in that accident. But to the best of my knowledge, that was just a private tragedy. Yeah, they broke the tail off trying to land. Anthony, that's why you're so bad. Well, I don't think that the helicopter pilot knew that he had lost the tail section. If he did, I think when he got down in the water the first time, he would have stayed there. He would have cut the engines. Now, maybe there was a technical malfunction. He couldn't cut the engines. But like I say, the whole thing, to the best of my knowledge, is just a tragic accident. Dan makes the point, maybe they couldn't buy the parts to maintain it. It's a KA, so they're manufactured in Russia. I don't think there's any dependency on external part suppliers. Well, thanks, Bernard. I sure appreciate it. It is not possible. Nothing that I do here is possible without people like Jan Halverson, who sponsored tonight's live. Big thanks to Jan. The Patreon folks who keep me in Ukraine. And I mean that not just financially, but, every day, or not every day, but you have bad days. And you think to yourself, oh, you know what, I should just go home. It's time to go home. It's time to go home, get a job, and stop playing war reporter. And then somebody like Grandma Nose comes along and says very nice things to me and makes me think it's worth it. So, at any rate, thanks, everybody. Maybe Steve, we'll see. It could be. I just don't know. We have a great team, Bernard. Holy shit, do I have a great team. I mean, it's quite a cheerleading section. Thanks, Bip. Thanks, Scott. So, guys, it is past 1 a.m. here. I'm going to call it a night. Big thanks to everybody who makes it possible. Thanks so much for joining me. Have a good night and a pleasant tomorrow. Take care.